Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Education and Skills Funding Agency in partnership with Ofsted and the Office for Students on Ofsted's inspection of Level 6 and 7 apprenticeship training. This session is aimed at training providers and specifically providers that are not familiar with Ofsted inspection. My name is George Winterbourne. I'm a policy official in the ESFA at the Department for Education, working on apprenticeships quality policy. I'll be joined by colleagues Paul Joyce and Joss Parsons from Ofsted. There'll be an opportunity for question and answers later in the webinar, where I'll be joined by my colleague Anthony Chalmers at the ESFA, as well as Brooke Storachurch from the Office for Students, who will also be on hand to answer any questions that you may have. And as before, we ask that you submit your questions as we go by following the instructions that you see on your screen shown there. And we'll be keeping an eye on these questions throughout so that we can pick up and discuss at the end. So just to give a brief overview of the purpose of today's session. So the aim of today is to provide you with some further information regarding Ofsted's inspection of Level 6 and 7 apprenticeship training, to help your organisation prepare for this change. The session builds upon the previous webinars that you'll recall we delivered in December of last year. And if you weren't able to attend those sessions for any reason, we'd really encourage you to listen back to those. The recording can be listened to online via the link shown. So I'll now briefly recap the broader policy context before I hand over to our colleagues at Ofsted, who will talk a bit more about their approach. So a brief recap on the overarching changes. So as you'll all be familiar with by now, from April this year, Ofsted will formally assume responsibility for the inspection of Level 6 and 7 apprenticeship training, in addition to its existing responsibilities at Levels 2 to 5. Ofsted will therefore become the body responsible for inspecting the quality of apprenticeship training at all levels. And as I mentioned before, this change is a key part of our broader work on quality, ensuring that employers and apprentices can have confidence that apprenticeship training is subject to a consistent approach to quality assurance, regardless of the type of provider delivering the training or the level of the apprenticeship. In terms of what will remain the same, the ESFA will continue to regulate all apprenticeship providers via its management of the Register of Apprenticeship Training Providers, and the ESFA will use the information that Ofsted provide to help inform this activity. And the Office for Students, as we covered before, will continue to regulate higher education providers on the OFS register to ensure that they continue to meet the conditions of registration, and will consider whether the outcome of an Ofsted inspection raises any wider concerns about quality. Now, for those of you who attended the last webinar, you will probably recall this visual on screen, which shows more visually the roles and responsibilities of Ofsted, the Office for Students and the ESFA in relation to the quality of quality assurance of apprenticeship training. And as a very brief recap, you'll recall that Ofsted will inspect the quality of apprenticeship training at all levels and will do so in accordance with their inspection handbook criteria. And the quality of education will be assessed within the context of the apprenticeship standard in terms of the extent to which the training develops the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Where a provider is also on the OFS's register, they'll continue to be in scope of OFS regulation, and as we heard Brooke outline last time, the OFS will continue to regulate in the same way at provider level. The ESFA will continue to regulate all apprenticeship providers via its management of the Register of Apprenticeship Training Providers. And as I mentioned before, the ESFA will continue to monitor providers using the information that they submit via their individualised learner record returns to ensure compliance with the apprenticeship funding rules, as it does already. And finally, just to flag that the ESFA can carry out funding audits. However, as we covered last time, for OFS registered providers, the ESFA has existing arrangements in place where the OFS provider exchange letters of assurance with the ESFA. So that's a very brief recap of the context from last time. But what I'll now do is I'll hand over to my colleagues at Ofsted, who are going to provide a bit more detail about their approach. So Paul, I'll hand over to you.
George, thanks very much indeed. Good morning, colleagues. My name's Paul Joyce. I'm a Deputy Director at Ofsted, and apprenticeship inspection falls in my area of responsibility. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. I can appreciate it's a busy time for you, preparing for students to return and continuing with online delivery for your learners. So appreciate your time. I'm going to start, as George did, with a quick recap and to talk through what we've been doing to prepare for our responsibilities coming into force on April the 1st, before I hand over to my colleague Joss, who's going to talk in a little bit more detail about monitoring visits, which are likely to be the first sort of activity that we undertake after April. So I'll start with that recap. As George has already said, the Secretary of State announcement confirmed that we will undertake level 6 and level 7 provision inspection from the 1st of April. We're looking forward to undertaking this work. We strongly support high quality apprenticeship training at all levels and are looking forward to seeing level 6 and level 7 provision from April. Provision at that level clearly has an important role to play in the apprenticeship field, and we look forward to looking at provision from April. We will ensure a consistent approach to quality assurance across those apprenticeships by applying our education inspection framework and our monitoring visits across apprenticeships at all levels and in all providers. So it will be the same monitoring visit, the same inspection framework that's applied consistently throughout apprenticeships, regardless of level or institution of delivery. We do appreciate that many of you on the call, particularly those of you in universities, but some in independent learning providers, may not have experienced an Ofsted inspection before. We're very keen to ensure that you know what to expect of Ofsted inspection and monitoring visits, hence these webinars, and indeed some other webinars that we'll be putting on in April that Joss will talk a little bit more about later. But just to confirm, our education inspection framework and our further education and skills inspection handbook are publicly available documents on our website. They detail the framework by which inspectors will evaluate apprenticeship provision against, and the further education and skills handbook details what providers can expect from inspection, as well as setting out the criteria and evaluation schedule which inspectors use for their inspections. For absolute clarity, the further education and skills handbook does cover apprenticeship provision and will, from the 1st of April, cover apprenticeship provision at levels 6 and 7, as well as at levels 2 to 5. And that's included in the skills element of the further education and skills handbook, as apprenticeship training is part of that skills portfolio. One thing we have highlighted before and important to recognise, for HEIs that deliver teacher training qualifications and teacher education apprenticeships, apprenticeships at levels 5 and 6 that relate to initial teacher education will not be inspected under the education inspection framework and under the arrangements we're talking about today. They fall under a different Ofsted inspection regime under our initial teacher education inspection framework. And again, those details can all be found on our website. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, and I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing to prepare for this work. Sincere thanks to many of you that will have been involved in some of this activity and with some of our meetings with providers and representative organisations, particularly in the HE sector. So we've held numerous meetings with different representative organisations, individually and collectively. We've met with a number of PSRBs, and these meetings have been incredibly helpful in informing our way forward and our communications. So they've certainly helped shape our inspector recruitment, training, amendments that we have made to handbooks and guidance material, and I'm very grateful to my team and indeed to everybody in the sector that's been involved with those meetings. We have been recruiting a number of specialist inspectors with direct and current experience of level 6 and level 7 apprenticeships, particularly in areas where there are high learner volumes. So we have extended our inspector workforce, so we do have more inspectors with that experience and expertise. Very pleased with the strong field of applications that we got, and again, if you were one of those applicants, thank you very much for applying and going through our training and assessment process. We've just completed that assessment process. We will, following the training of those successful applicants, be looking to carry out a further, more targeted campaign, and we will be in touch in due course with our recruitment needs. We are devising training for our existing inspectors, and we will ensure that they are informed about the differences they may encounter when inspecting level 6 and level 7 provision and the HEI context. And again, that training will have been informed, has been informed by the extensive consultation we've done with sector representative organisations. We've started to update our inspection handbook. We held a meeting with representative organisations earlier in the week. Very, very helpful as we complete the amendments to our inspection handbook, and once the reopening announcements are fully made and understood, we will seek to publish or republish our inspection handbook as soon as it's possible for us to do so. But we will, in the meantime, continue to contact providers directly that are impacted by any changes that we make to the handbook in terms of inspection timeframes. And indeed, I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but I will continue to keep providers up to date about changes to our inspection plans as and when they are made. I thought it'd be useful to talk a little bit over the next 2 slides about what we have discovered in terms of level 6 and level 7 provision, and therefore what we're going to take into account with our training and guidance for inspectors. So amongst other things, it's very clear that there are some differences, but many similarities between provision at level 6 and level 7 and in HEIs compared to apprenticeships at lower levels and delivered in other organisations. Some of the differences, some of the main differences we have established are around governance within organisations, and how apprenticeship provision is managed in different institutions. So we're very aware of how governance and apprenticeship provision is monitored, quality assured and managed in the different sectors, and clearly we'll be making inspectors aware of those different arrangements and different procedures, so they're aware of what to expect given the different institutions they will inspect in. We're obviously aware of the differences in regulatory frameworks that govern apprenticeships across different levels in universities, college and ILPs, and that will feature very heavily in the training that we will provide to inspectors. We've also established the degree and integrated degree apprenticeship model, how those courses are typically delivered, how the integration works, how the training and assessment integration works, and we're clearly aware of the impending consultation by the Institute. We'll keep inspectors fully informed of that and make sure inspectors are aware of the integrated nature of degree apprenticeships on many programmes. We've talked with a number of PSRBs and explored their role in relation to specific apprenticeship standards. We have got a good understanding of their entry and eligibility requirements and the role they play in approval, recognition and accreditation of programmes, and therefore how inspectors will use the information and intelligence provided by PSRBs through their various reports and accreditation programmes to inform the judgments that inspectors will make when we're looking at the quality of apprenticeship training. We have become very aware of the different practices, procedures around safeguarding, particularly where students are of older age groups, so the difference between adults and 16 to 18-year-olds, and the different arrangements that different institutions have given the age and different qualifications that are offered. Clearly, with safeguarding, as with aspects of personal development that we will inspect as part of our framework, there will be an age-appropriate expectation that inspectors will have when looking at provision in different organisations with students of different age groups. And clearly that's going to feature very heavily in the training we provide inspectors. So some really, really useful, helpful differences and similarities that we can bring out in inspector training and guidance to ensure our inspectors are well equipped to undertake their work from the 1st of April. We're obviously aware of a number of things we need to take into account given some of the current issues we all face, particularly around COVID. It's been really interesting to look at the different infection protection and control measures that are in place in different organisations. We're all well aware of the attendance restrictions that are in place that are just starting to be eased with the wider reopening of provision. And clearly in terms of infection protection and control and attendance restrictions, inspectors will be very aware of procedures in individual organisations, both when we're scheduling inspection activity and indeed when we start to undertake inspection activity. That will obviously extend to the personal and employment circumstances of apprentices. We're aware that many remain on furlough. We're aware that some employment sectors remain all but closed as a result of continuing national lockdown arrangements. We're also aware that employers will be facing difficult circumstances, and we will take due account of those and the planned reopening of businesses in employment and the economy when we schedule inspections and when we plan our inspection activity. Inevitably, there will have been an impact on the curriculum, on how apprenticeships have been delivered throughout the pandemic, and on plans for catching up with assessment or lost learning, developing the knowledge, skills and understanding that apprentices need, and ensuring that they are ready for assessment at an appropriate time. So again, we will take due account of all of that when we're planning assessments, planning inspections and planning inspection activity. We're all familiar now with remote and online education. Of course, this is not new during COVID. There's always been an element of this within what we inspect and indeed what the sector delivers. But we have seen a significant increase in remote and online learning, and inspectors are very aware of how that works, what they can expect to see, and what works well and what's a challenge for providers. We're also aware, as many of you will be, the announcements around data and the impact of the pandemic on the availability of performance data, particularly, and the impact that's likely to have. So we will make inspectors aware of that. We will take account of those factors when scheduling our activity and indeed when conducting any activity that we do schedule after the 1st of April. So moving now to our plans for return. You'll be aware, colleagues, that since the 17th of March last year, we suspended our routine activity. We've been undertaking different sorts of inspection activity since then, and from January 2021 to the current day, we're completing what we're calling progress monitoring visits. And some of you may have experienced progress monitoring visits if you have lower level provision. All of that activity is remote by default due to national lockdown restrictions, and that will continue to be the case until the 8th of March, next Monday. We are very aware that inspecting providers remotely does limit our ability to provide the same level of assurance that on-site activity enables, and we are looking to get back to on-site face-to-face activity as soon as it's possible to do so. Our inspectors have been conducting on-site activity if they've had serious concerns about provision, and between now and when we return to face-to-face provision, we'll continue to conduct on-site activity if we have serious concerns. But now we have had announcements about the wider reopening of provision from the 8th of March. We are starting to implement our plans for our return to routine activity, and we fully appreciate that the extent of the wider reopening will differ with different age groups in providers and indeed across the different types of providers that we inspect. So as you would expect, we are in regular communication with the DfE and with other colleagues to monitor what the announcements mean for the different sectors that we inspect, and we will take due regard of those announcements and what that means for sectors when scheduling and delivering our activities. So, for example, we know in HE providers that the on-site learning will currently be limited to those delivering practical subjects and needing to access equipment, and that's the case pending a further announcement after Easter. So that will limit some of our activity in HEIs and in the level 6, level 7 space. depending on what that further announcement after Easter is likely to mean for HEIs. But as I've said, we will take due account of all of those announcements and individual circumstances before we undertake any activity. So our current plans, we are intending to return to conducting face-to-face monitoring visits, and we are going to do that from week commencing the 15th of March. We will have a particular focus on getting back to doing face-to-face new provider monitoring visits. So if you are a new provider and you are overdue a new provider monitoring visit, we are going to get back to doing that face-to-face activity from the 15th of March. We do expect our return to full inspection to take a little bit longer to implement. And again, some of that will depend on reopening announcements and the individual circumstances of providers with things like assessments, attendance, and what provision actually looks like on the ground. In order to ensure we can return to full inspection, we will be conducting a number of pilots across all the different types of provider that we inspect. And we're doing that to ensure that we can apply our inspection framework fairly and consistently. And we will not be returning to routine activity until we're satisfied that we can apply our framework fairly and consistently across the providers that we inspect. So we will be conducting pilot activity with volunteer providers. We'll be doing that from the 15th of March or as soon as possible thereafter. But as I'm sure you will appreciate, the exact timing of pilots will differ provider type by provider type, and we anticipate our pilots will run over a number of weeks from the 15th of March. We are likely to extend our inspection and monitoring visit timelines to take account of the disruption caused by COVID and the suspension of routine activity. And that will mean that some of our monitoring visit timelines or inspection timelines will be extended. As soon as those decisions are made, we will communicate those to you, and we will do that through the handbook, through the publication of operational notes, and indeed directly to providers that are impacted. So as soon as changes are made, we will inform you of what those changes are. To briefly recap from the 1st of April, what we will be doing on our current plans, we will assume responsibility for level 6 and level 7 on the 1st of April as planned. Any inspection activity that we complete after the 1st of April will include level 6 and level 7 provision if, as a provider, you have that provision or you are offering that provision. A reminder again, we are inspecting the quality of apprenticeship training. We are not specifically there to inspect degrees or qualifications, and we do not have responsibility to inspect the academic standard of the degree qualification, as that remains the responsibility of the Office for Students as a regulator for HE. I'll again reiterate that we will be mindful of the current circumstances of providers and the relevant DfE guidance on wider reopening when we're scheduling providers and before we undertake any visit. We will also take account of any information that you have supplied or will supply via our inspection information survey when we're scheduling those visits. We are going to schedule visits from April 2021 when our responsibility commences, but I will reiterate that is a from date, and that does not mean that we will necessarily be scheduling activity in April 2021. For any activity that we do schedule, if as a provider you feel circumstances are not right for an inspection, we do have a deferral policy. I would recommend that you familiarise yourself with that policy, and if you consider it's necessary to request a deferral, please reference that policy, and on notification, if you wish to request a deferral, the procedure by which you do so will be explained to you, A, in the policy document, B, by a member of staff that is in contact with you on notification, and we will consider those requests on a case-by-case basis. We are, as I've said, intending to schedule activity from the 1st of April, and depending what category of provider you are, so whether you are a brand new provider offering level 6 or level 7, whether you are a provider that offers level 6 and level 7 in addition to other provision, and depending when you last received a monitoring visit or inspection, will determine when we visit you from the 1st of April. And the details on the slide now set out what those expected timescales will be from the 1st of April in each of those different categories. Colleagues, what I'm now going to do is hand over to Joss, who is going to talk a little bit more about monitoring visits, as this is likely to be the first sort of activity that we do get back to, and will be the bulk of our activity from the 1st of April. So it's something that will be most relevant to you. Joss, over to you.
Hello, colleagues. Good to speak to you. It's Joss Parsons. I hope you can hear me clearly. So building on what Paul has just said, and also building on what we said at the December conference, obviously you'll have those slides and that recording of the last conference. And as Paul says, given that we're planning to start our return to routine inspection activity with new provider monitoring visits, going to focus on that in the next a few slides, so you know what to expect from that. Also to emphasize that we will be delivering some Ofsted inspection information webinars in April, and we'll provide more details of that in due course and send out the invites in due course. Those will provide more detailed insights about full inspections, for instance, and particularly about the inspection of the quality of education training and the curriculum and our overall methodology. So, new provider monitoring visits, a bit of a recap here from last time. We usually conduct a monitoring visit to a new provider before conducting a first full inspection. And indeed, the outcome of the monitoring visit informs the timing of the first full inspection. As you'll have seen from a couple of slides back, if you are only delivering level 6 and 7, then obviously then you'll be a brand new provider to Ofsted from the 1st of April. You'll get your monitoring visit within 24 months of that. We'll usually then get your full inspection within 24 months of the monitoring visit, unless it happens that you're found to be making insufficient progress, in which case the full inspection will take place sooner. We say 6 to 12 months. And those are normal general timescales. Referred there to insufficient progress. On monitoring visits, inspectors make progress judgments against the 3 themes. And there are 3 types of progress judgment: insufficient progress, reasonable progress, and significant progress. And of course, we will hope you will get reasonable or significant, and but there are cases where some providers do get insufficient progress, in which case that has an impact and also can have an effect on your funding and intervention action. That's for ESFA colleagues to explain. The three themes that we cover, as you can see there, really fall into three areas: leadership and management of apprenticeship training or education. How much progress have leaders made in ensuring that the provider is meeting all the requirements of successful apprenticeship provision? And I'll come back and we can unpack that a little bit. The second theme is around the quality of education and training. What progress have leaders and managers made in ensuring that apprentices benefit from high quality training that leads to positive outcomes for apprentices? Positive outcomes for apprentices. Yes, of course, one very clear positive outcome for the apprentice is they will pass their apprenticeship, but there are other outcomes, really important ones. Their longer term destination, are they meeting their next steps? Their career plan, whether that's promotion, whether that's sustainable work, whether that's going on to further training or further or higher education. That's what the ambitious next steps that were set out at the beginning of their apprenticeship. So are they on course for that? What progress have leaders and managers making ensuring that they're benefiting from high quality training that ensures that? And thirdly, and it's the evergreen in whatever we inspect, how much progress are leaders and managers making ensuring that effective safeguarding arrangements are in place? I'll come back to say a bit more about safeguarding. 2 days notice of a monitoring visit, 2 working days notice up to you'll get. So if we were to start on the monitoring visit on a Tuesday and Wednesday, we would let you know the Friday beforehand. Visit usually lasts for 2 days. That's 2 on-site days when we'll be with you and discussing with you. Feedback is provided at the end of the visit. A valued aspect of the monitoring visit is the feedback, but it will also, that same feedback will be encapsulated in a published report in due course. You can see inspection reports of other providers in the Ofsted reports website there. So you can see how other similar providers have been reported on. Obviously more detail in the inspection handbook. Next slide, please. And just to recap, again, as you know, Ofsted grades and assesses the whole of a provider's apprenticeship provision on inspection and monitoring visit. So from April 2021, all apprenticeship provision that providers delivered will be graded and assessed collectively, irrespective of the grades of provision delivered. So if you're already delivering, say, 4 and 5, but you're also delivering 6 and 7, when we next come back to see you, and it may be a monitoring visit, your new provider monitoring visit, it will be covering your right through. So before your 4 and 5 and your 6 and 7, or whatever it is between 2 and 7. No separate grading for different levels or different subjects or standards, or whether it's a degree or non-degree apprenticeship. It's all apprenticeship training, and they'll be in there together. There may be, of course, some differentiation in the way we report, according to what we find. But otherwise, it will the progress judgment will, each progress judgment will cover your apprenticeship provision as a whole. And just to say again, Ofsted inspects quality of apprenticeship training in accordance with the inspection handbook criteria and within the context of the apprenticeship standards relevant to the provision you're delivering. We don't assess academic quality standards, the degree qualification, in terms of whether it's meeting sector recognised standard for higher education. That's OFS's responsibility. Ofsted inspects apprenticeship training, nor, might I reiterate, do we inspect the quality of endpoint assessment. Now, we know that we appreciate that means that inspectors will, at times, or may do, visit classes, lectures, seminars, workshops, or whatever learning sessions, where there are also undergraduates learning at the same time. That's something that we'll expect you to help us with. The nominee will should help us to distinguish which learners are doing what course, where that is the case. That's not unusual. The same things happens with other, obviously, apprenticeships. So there may be GCSEs or A-levels going on. It's the same kind of thing. But, we're well aware of that, and obviously we're sensitive to it. Of course, the apprenticeship may also be studying a degree if it's a degree apprenticeship, and we're well aware of that too, and what that overlap entails. Some specific sections of the handbook there for you to gen up on if you know to expect a new provider monitoring visit. There's a monitoring visit section as a whole in the handbook, some particular paragraphs. A little bit about safeguarding, that's obviously the third of the themes. And just to reiterate again, obviously we expect your arrangements to be appropriate to the age of the students. Now, obviously, if they're under 18 and they're effectively legally categorised as children, there are certain requirements that apply. And those of you who are delivering maybe level 2 and 3, some level 4s as well, may have people under 18. And you need to make sure that you're applying the right requirements. Our main concern is there a culture of safeguarding and protection that's in place? Is it a good positive culture that ensures that all learners are safe? That's what we're concerned about. So we know that obviously if you're 18 and over, you're an adult effectively, and obviously level 6 and 7 apprenticeship apprentices will be over those ages. We appreciate that. Obviously, those same things don't apply, but other good practice does apply. And obviously, you'll want to have suitable partnership arrangements to making sure with your employers, making sure that safeguarding arrangements are effective, and that you're following the relevant government guidance. Prevent duty is an obvious case, which of course applies to all age students, and that your safeguarding procedures are understood appropriately by staff and students. Obviously, if there are adults, but you'll want to assess whether there are any vulnerable adults amongst them. You'll need to take appropriate measures for those. And for further guidance, there's some paragraph numberings there on inspection handbook. Next slide, please. Can we have the next slide, please? Sorry, it's me being slow. What's on this slide is verbatim the inspection evaluation criteria that underpin what inspectors look at, whether in effect it's on a full inspection or a monitoring visit. Monitoring visits cover the same ground but arrive at progress judgments. What progress have leaders and managers made, etc., as you'll see from themes 1 to 3. But you'll see that these evaluation criteria do fall quite neatly into those same themes. So leadership and management, really under that first bullet. Consider how well leaders and managers ensure the apprenticeship curriculum meets the principles and requirements of an apprenticeship, including the extent to which providers, staff engage with employers as necessary. A very key and important part of the relationship and important responsibility for leaders and managers, including completing the apprenticeship commitment statement and obviously acting upon it. The second and third bullets there really are effectively about the quality of the training. And that will be judging how well trainers, assessors, coaches and mentors communicate up-to-date vocational technical subject knowledge, reflecting expected industry practice and meeting employers' needs. And crucially, determining whether apprentices are acquiring that knowledge effectively so they demonstrate required skills and behaviours, enabling them to complete their apprenticeships. And above and beyond that, contribute to their workplace, fulfil their career aims by progressing to intended job roles or sustained employment, etc., getting to their next steps, as we say. And finally, safeguarding again, that's obviously our third theme. So a typical monitoring visit timetable, similar again to the full inspection, same overarching time scales. 2 working days notice in the case of monitoring visit, 2 days on site. If it's a full inspection, maybe 3 or 4. At the end of the on-site stage, final feedback. Then we'll come back to you to check with you the factual accuracy of the report draft. And then we move to report publication. It all happens fairly quickly, and you can see the outcomes of it pretty quickly. Inspection nominee. This is something you'll want to be thinking about. A reminder, each provider will need to select an inspection nominee. That's the provider's go-to person, liaising with the inspection team throughout the inspection and monitoring visit. Setting out the characteristics of a nominee, their level within the organisation, detailed understanding, especially senior, carrying out the role with autonomy, suitable authority. Obviously, you'll want to think about, is that me, or is it one of my colleagues, or who amongst your leaders and managers is appropriate. Responsibility is liaison throughout, providing information to the lead inspector, support inspection planning, briefing your staff about arrangements, informing apprentices and employers about inspection, attending team meetings, etc., coordinating feedback arrangements during at the end of inspection, liaising with the lead inspector, ensuring that documents are available and that staff and apprentices can attend meetings. One thing I will reiterate here, as we have done before, we don't expect you to provide any documents or information that you don't have. We'll use what you have. We don't expect you to spend time planning for the monitoring visit or inspection. We want to see you as you are. We want you to spend your valuable time doing what you're best at, your day job, which is delivering good quality training. So please don't spend time on preparation. We're providing you with this information so you can have a sense of readiness. Next slide, please. So, and finally, you'll have queries here, but things will occur to you afterwards, or you may want to have a more specific question, which may be about you as a provider. Please do email us in on this mailbox. We have already answered, I think, about 40 or 50 queries we've had from you since the last conferences. We find that works really well, because sometimes you have to tell us things that you know about you in order that we have the context, so we can give you the right answer and accurate information. That works well. Please do keep using that, and don't be scared to ask, when are we likely to be inspected, because we will answer that as best we can. And I appreciate that is a question that's often on front of your mind, understandably. If you think you've got incorrect or out-of-date information, please let us know through the same mailbox, and then we can make sure we're getting through to the right people. And so when we notify you, we'll get to the right people, and it won't be wasting time going through switchboards and other systems. Thanks. In March, we'll be writing to you with our annual inspection information survey. Some of you will be familiar with this. For those who aren't, it's about you telling us useful stuff that you probably want to tell us anyway, about when you deliver apprenticeship training to help us plan your inspection effectively, ensure inspection works well for you and goes smoothly. So it's about the pattern and timing of your teaching and training sessions, because some of you may be doing it 1 day a week or in a block of time, etc. We want to see you doing your training. We're not trying to catch you out. We want to see you when you're working, and see what you're doing, where you're delivering it, any changes or proposed changes to your provision. Please let us know. That helps in our forward planning. Any safety considerations, etc., we should be aware of. That's really crucial. And when we write to you, and it will be in the next couple of weeks, please do get back to us. I think we'll be asking for it by the end of March. If you can do it then, please do it thereafter. But please do get back to us. It really helps us to help you. Thanks. We've also request, and it is a request, it's voluntary, we share with us self-assessment quality improvement report or equivalent about your provision. if you've got an updated self-assessment report or whatever you call it, you've done one since March 2020, please do send it to this mailbox. Or if you are going to update it anytime in the near future, please do send it in whenever you're able to. That's really helpful. Thanks. Finally, we will be running these Ofsted inspection information webinars, and they'll be informed by matters you raise with us. So any queries you may have today or afterwards will help us to make sure that well tailored for your immediate interests. Thank you.
Today, just a couple of very final things from me, and in addition to what Anthony's just said there about questions and further information, we'll, as we mentioned at the beginning, we will share the slides from today, so keep an eye out for an email from us. And then just two final things. One is feedback. When you leave today, you'll get a prompt to leave some feedback for us, which we'd be very grateful for, because we always value that. And then the second thing is just the further events that Ofsted will be holding that Joss mentioned later, well, in April. So some further information will follow on those. But other than that, thank you again for joining. And as I say, we really welcome your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.